here today with Chantil Dukart from Colorado. How are you today?
Good. I just came off a 5-day pretty intensive tour schedule, so I just got home. I'm doing laundry, catching up.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you so much for joining. You have a lot going on. I know you mentioned you were on tour. Tell us a little bit about where you were.
So over the weekend, I went to Alaska to go play with an Inuit soul group that I tour with called Bumua. They're originally from Bethel, rural Alaska, and it's really a pleasure to work with other Native American musicians. And I flew back Sunday to go play with the national group, the Julia Keefe Indigenous Big Band, and we played in Fort Collins on Sunday, and then we just played last night at the Newman Center here in Denver, and we had about 600 people come. It was a fantastic show, and just really thankful in the last couple of years to have more Indigenous contemporaries that are like actively, creatively interacting with me in my life. It's been a great joy.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, and I do want to say congratulations on all of those shows. I know the Newman Center, that's a great venue, and I'm so glad that there were so many people there to support and just to hear what you all do.
It's a really powerful story. I mean, especially with a big band, Julia Keefe, the director of the group, she does a lot of storytelling and talking on stage about Indian boarding schools and how everybody in the band has some direct descendant grandparent that went to an Indian boarding school. I have 2 of my grandparents went to Indian boarding schools, and talking about just blood quantum and all these kinds of issues that modern Indigenous people face that aren't part of the normal lexicon of what people talk about. So it's really nice to be in a space where, especially working with other musicians, that we all get it and we've all experienced this in our personal lives. And it's nice to have creatively and artistically interact with people who have a similar background, because like for me, my dad's white, my mom's Native, and like growing up in both worlds, and also a world where like, my mom's parents were forbidden to practice the culture. So a lot of that got lost. And so it's like, for me, like identifying as a Native person and being excited about it, but not knowing even enough about my own culture because it was systematically distanced from the people. It's like, it's almost like an identity crisis. But then to work with like 17 other people in a big band that have all had that same exact experience, it kind of like validifies that like feeling of like, am I Native enough? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's an interesting social complex issues to dissect.
Well, I would imagine so. And I was actually going to ask you something related to that. If you would like to, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, in terms of the musical piece, so the contemporary jazz, the pianist and vocalist side of you, but also where and how you really started to connect that to your identity and your background. Is that something that's always been there, or did that happen over time?
So that's a good question. I have definitely, I think, had compartmentalized different parts of my life, not by design, but just by the nature of how my life unfolded. And it was only later in my life, actually towards the end of my 20s, 30s, that like I was going to my therapist and I want to be more connected to my Native culture. I feel disconnected, da da da. And then like, boom, right after that, I got the call from Julia to go play in Juneau, which happens to be where a lot of my tribal members are located. So I got reconnected culturally, and then starting to interact with other Native artists, kind of like blended both of those worlds and brought it back into my life. But largely my music before that, I had the classical years of my life, and then jazz, and then hip hop. And now I'm even circling back. Like last night, I got to play one of my classical pieces at the Newman Center. So it's like, my musical stance is pretty wide, from hip hop to classical music to jazz. And I have started to connect more of my music to like social issues and things that I care about. because before that, a lot of my music over the last 10 years has been mainly about like heartbreak and love and like the low hanging fruit of the inspiration realm. You know, everybody's relates to love and heartbreak. So I still have that element of my music, but I'm also, there's like, yes, and there's more to life than just love life, so.
Yeah, I know. I saw that, and I want to talk about the festival coming up for sure, but I
Yeah.
saw that you're doing a Beastie Boys kind of inspired show coming up, and I was super excited. So I'm from New Jersey, New
Oh,
York City area, and grew up in the 90s, which I was really getting, early 90s, getting really into music. And I thought to myself, I love that you are able to kind of cross all of those different genres, because for me, it all connects, it all works, different pieces of things. But I love that. Can you talk to me a little bit about kind of what that's going to be like? And then I think, is it the Dukes of Art you're going to be playing with?
yeah. So the Beastie Boys component is funny because it's like the closest thing I could get to describing this like punk element in my personality that comes out of my jazz, because I did grow up in the 90s too, and I listened to a lot of punk music growing up. And so like that has always been a part of my personality. And it's funny, sometimes people don't always see that. They see the jazz pianist first, and it's like I actually have a lot of different musical layers, and that part of my personality is like that like 13-year-old spunky little skater football munchkin tomboy that has just never died and never will.
Well, I feel the same. And I think it's got to feel pretty good to be able to explore all of that. So I did want to chat a little bit about the upcoming Modern Jazz and Soul Festival, which of course is being put on by Roots Music Project in Boulder. That is coming up very soon, the 11th and 12th. You are going to be playing on the 11th, I believe. Is that right?
Yep, that's this Friday. So this Friday, Boulder, Colorado, Roots
Mhm.
Music Project. If you haven't been there yet, it's a great kind of homegrown venue that has really been supporting the artistic community up in Boulder and to some extent Denver, and just trying to build a space where emerging artists and other people can create. I'm sure, as you're well aware, a lot of the music industry, there's a lot of gatekeepers. There's a lot of like venues that artists want to play that only book artists that are associated with certain conglomerates. And it can be very like, for lack of better term, clicky. And so Roots has really been a kind of like an open door community for a lot of people. And I think has kind of, just brought a whole varied, diverse group of people together. So Roots is really cool. If you haven't been there yet, it's in Boulder, Colorado, and we're going to be throwing down Friday night. I'm sure if you've looked at the lineup yet, Derek Hodges is playing, one of the most incredible bass players. We're lucky to have him here in Colorado. I cannot wait to watch his set after my set. So I go on at 7:30, and he'll be on, I think, at 9:30-ish. So make sure if you haven't got your tickets yet, come out to the show, support live music, turn off the TV, get out of the house, come see us.
Right on. So, how do you approach a set at a festival like that? Do you do anything differently in terms of what you would be playing, musical styles? I would love to know, because I'm always really interested how artists approach festivals versus maybe more of a kind of traditional show setup.
Yeah, it's hard at a festival to only have 45 minutes because I'm used to playing for like 2-3 hours at a time. So it's like you kind of got to like pack in all the good stuff, and you got to be really choosy. I sent the set list to the boys, and they're like, this set list is too long for 45 minutes. You need to cut some stuff. And I'm like, dang it. But it's hard to cut things because you're like, each song is like special, and it's really hard to pick and choose. And, you have your tried and true songs. Like I have songs that have been in my repertoire for a long time that I've written that are always show, people love them. But as an artist, I'm always trying to do new stuff. So it's kind of blending in the new stuff with some of the heavy the classics, if you will. So, I'm trying to mix it up, but I am maybe trying a new song on Friday. depending
Nice.
if I can get my charts written in time. So.
You know, what you just mentioned is something I always say about DJing, which I have this theory, and I'm a researcher by day, also a podcaster by day, all by day. Whereas I think there's a formula or a recipe somewhere where people hear things that are known or more familiar to them at a certain pace. You can then sprinkle in, right, things that are new that maybe they haven't heard, kind of keep them feeling comfortable so that they're open to hearing things that are new, because that's not always easy for music fans, even people who are, you know, really ingrained in a particular music community. People like to hear things that they know, and so I can appreciate what you're talking about.
That element, I think, plays a huge role in it's the artist's dilemma to be catering to the audience versus where you're at in your artistic journey at that moment. And it's a really hard line to play. And I would even say to the extent that that social aspect, even it kind of hurts the music scene in a certain way, because especially in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen this huge rise in tribute bands, right? So a lot of even original music venues that were formerly places where original bands could play their music for their audience so that they can become familiar. A lot of these venues are booking tribute bands because they're struggling for relevancy in a Netflix world where people have entertainment at their homes and they don't need to leave their houses anymore to go get entertained. So like these venues are struggling for this like relevancy to like keep audiences engaged. And then they're like catering to this tribute thing because people do prefer to hear things that they know. I mean, we have hundreds of Grateful Dead cover bands in Colorado, and I've made this point and I'll make it again, that if you're an original band struggling to get audiences, a consistent audience to your band, to your shows, it might be because your potential fans are at a Grateful Dead cover band show because they have such a strong hold on what would be the original music market. And so this, like, and no hate to the Grateful Dead, by the way, but I'm just saying that this social trend does hurt the original artist because, again, people do not like to hear things they're familiar with, but they can't become familiar with things that they haven't heard. So it's like,
Yes,
like it's like the chicken or the egg, right?
it is. Okay, so I will reveal that a couple years ago, out of love, I built a Grateful Dead tribute band name generator, and it looks like a little slot machine, and you press the button, and it's thousands of combinations of song lyrics, song titles, and it pops up a random 3 or 4 word band name. Because I'm like, there's so many. How do you pick a band name that hasn't been used yet for the Grateful Dead? Because I was noticing the same thing and trying, you know, to talk to friends about come and see this other band. They're great. It's not always an easy conversation. And I don't know if it ever will be an easy thing. People, especially maybe these days, really want to stick with things that they know and that are comfortable. Yeah. But I think about that. I'm not a musician, but as someone who really tries to support live music, that bringing things in front of people, I think, is so important, but it's not always easy to do. So I really respect what you're saying. And that's one reason why this show exists, is just to try to have conversations so that we can make sure we're getting as much information out there as possible. You know, because you've played with some absolutely incredible artists. And I would love to talk about that as well. I was curious, though, since you're local and I live in the area too, how do you think the Denver Boulder scenes kind of match up there in terms of appetite for live music in general?
Before I answer that question, I want to say one last thing about the last subject that we were just talking about, and that one way that venues and artists can move forward with these trends and to like make it mutually beneficial for everyone is partnering tribute bands with. So maybe if there's a tribute band who has a huge following and they're getting 300 ticket sales, partnering them with an original band so that that band can build up followers too of their own music, and so the audience is getting a taste of the familiar with something new. So having co-bills, I think, is a great way to blend those two worlds.
Awesome idea. I love that.
I'm actually trying to book a show with Steely Dead, which is an incredible. I'm a huge Steely Dan fan.
That's awesome. They're great.
my music is kind of Steely Dan adjacent, and I was like, okay, how can I like work with this
Yeah,
trend and like, you know what I mean?
I do. And actually, it was funny because they came to my mind because a couple years ago, they opened for Dumpstaphunk at
Oh,
Cervantes. And that was one of the first times at least what came to my mind right away, where I saw something like that. And I thought that was such a cool bill because, of
it's
course, locally here, people know
yeah,
them too.
it's socially I think conscious to be able to blend original music and those co-bills of tribute so that the tribute band is feeding back into the original music scene. You know what I
Love
mean?
that.
Yeah,
Totally.
cool. Okay, so to your next question, Denver Boulder scene. I think Denver has a really strong scene. I do think, that there's a lot of gatekeepers for bands coming in, and there's a little bit of like some of the venues that where all the original fans are very kind of difficult to book with, and um it it's yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's a little clicky maybe, but I don't see enough women on lineups. I know a lot of really talented women that aren't getting booked as much as men, and no hate to all my men friends who are musicians, but I see a little bit of favoritism just in like people, maybe not thinking considering women as much for stuff.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago now. I actually think it was during COVID pandemic era. I chatted with Sarah Mount, who just I know moved
Oh
back
yeah.
to Germany, and at the time she was leading the musicians union or the Colorado musicians union out here, and we talked about that for a while. And she told me information that I had not known before, which is when you get down to what she does, horns, that kind of that section, that it's something like 1 in 8 statistically in terms
Yeah.
of performers are women, and I that floored me that that's where we're at in like 2021 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
um, and so yeah, I completely see that, and I hope at some point that really starts changing. One thing that I talked about on this show are sometimes on a bill. So Winter Wondergrass is an example of this, festival that plays out in different places. There will sometimes be an all-female supergroup,
Right.
and they'll have a name, some kind of name to signify that. And I wonder to myself, is that helping or is that hurting? I don't know.
So I have a very interesting take on this, and I think that this form of programming can be a little hurtful to the scene and women specifically, because all these women are used to maybe leading their own projects, and so it's like almost like tokenizing female dumb and checking a box, and you're throwing all these women in a musically unfamiliar situation, so you're putting them at a disadvantage to performing, and sometimes these women have never even performed together, and you're like, okay, you're all in one group now, go. And like, whereas all these men are in these groups that they've played with for 5 years, so they're like tight, and just throwing them all into one super group. I'm not a huge fan of that, to be honest. I think it puts them at a musical disadvantage to put on the highest caliber of artistic integrity in the show that they can.
Yeah, I tend to feel similarly, and to me it always just seems so obvious
Yeah,
that
it is obvious.
that's what's happening, and I'm like, but do we really need to do that? We shouldn't need to do that. Like, if that's what people that are in programming are thinking needs to happen, then that right there to me is a huge red flag of, something should be changing. So I appreciate you sharing, your honest thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that even beyond the female component, there's also just I've noticed in the music industry this corporatization of booking in the process. So it's like I'm reaching out to venues. I spend most of my time booking, to be honest, and I'm reaching out to venues that should totally be within my tier with my resume and like what I'm capable of, that I should be able to book these venues. And these venues won't even respond to me because they work with agents that work with specific music groups, that they only book artists that work with these groups. Like, I'm not going to name any of them because I don't want to get blackmailed. But I'm just saying that it does feel a little bit like a music mafia, and that if you're not in the mafia, it is incredibly hard to book even small to mid-range venues. Like there's a bar by my house. I'm not going to name this, but I've lived right next to this bar for 3 years. I go there twice a week. I'm friends with all the staff. I've tried to book there for 3 years. I played all over the country, and I couldn't get booked because they were booked by a music conglomerate that's cuckolding the whole scene. And like, I had to fight to get this booking at a local bar right next to my house. And like, it's just frustrating to feel like you have to fight for like breadcrumbs when you're like trying to like transcend and thrive, and you're like stuck in this survival state of just trying to like book the local bar by your house. You know, it shouldn't be that hard, especially when you got your ducks in a row.
Absolutely. Well, and like you said, with your resume, and I had noticed, it made me smile, in your bio online, you had referenced some of the venues you have played out, and I saw mention the Kuumbwa Jazz Center in Santa
Oh, yeah.
Cruz, which I used to live out there. I'm out there actually a whole lot, and I love that venue. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I wonder what would be the reason in particular to mention that venue. I'm just curious because I do know it. I've been there many times. Was that a specific kind of experience for you playing there?
So that's a good question. And the short answer is that I had a friend who was helping me put together my bio, and he recognized the venue, and he's like, oh, you should put this, because on the same run, we did Stanford University in Kuumbwa. So that was on there, and I didn't realize it was such a small, intimate venue, but my friends thought it looks good on my resume. They're helping me, and they put.
Well, it totally jumped out to me because I know that it is a place that really does value all the things that we're talking about, you know, and has for a long time. But I guess along that same line, you know, being somebody that's performed at the Kennedy Center, at the Smithsonian, you know, various jazz festivals, when you think about kind of that trajectory, do you ever stop and kind of feel to yourself, I don't know how to ask this question really, getting to be at those kinds of places, is there ever kind of a sense of trepidation or uncertainty, or is it kind of a very comfortable feeling for you, just knowing the history of a place like the Kennedy Center? I always wonder, what does it feel like to be on stage there, like having that experience of playing there?
I mean, the Kennedy Center was a very incredible experience. I maybe am not familiar with the history you're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
But I just being able to play such prestigious venues that are like nationally and perhaps internationally known, it just, in some sense, especially when you've been grinding on such a level, like when you're playing bars, corporate events, like background music, doing every gig, to get the validation of playing such a top tier venue, it kind of gives, I guess, validity in to like, yes, okay, what I have done something with my life. I achieved this great thing. And I don't know if that is, um, I don't know. It just kind of, it also helps with like booking and people taking you seriously. I mean, it's like if you have something like that on your resume, it helps people not treat you like a nobody. I know that sounds horrible, but it's so hard booking out here when people don't know you. It's hard to get people to even respond to your emails. So even being able to say something like that, it gives you a slight bigger chance of people even responding to you. But yeah, it was a really beautiful experience. We also got to perform with Esperanza Spalding, and she's one of my heroes. And being able to work with her all week and then perform with her and musically interact, it was, surreal for sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the collaboration or work you've done with Nikki Glaspie? And I ask because we've had her on this show. I'm a huge fan of everything she does. I've seen her in so many different configurations. And I love that I saw her referenced to as someone that you've performed with.
So I got to perform with her down in Texas. I was on tour with this artist, Marcus Rizak, who's kind of a shredder on the guitar. And that was another total just like bucket list, playing with one of the most incredible female musicians in the country, probably in the world. And I have so much respect for her. And she's just so true to the heritage and lineage of groove music, and just such a like inspirational human being. I mean, she's someone I definitely like. I see her career and I'm like, okay, if she can do it, I could do it. You know what I mean? Like she's very she's just an awesome person. So it was definitely a gift to be able to perform with her.
Yes, for sure. And I'll be at Jazz Fest, and I know I'll be seeing her there a whole bunch of times. So I feel like she's somebody that tends to like make the rounds over those 2 weekends and just play
Definitely
out.
hooked in the scene.
Yes, for sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about what else you might have coming up, this spring or even, throughout the rest of the year. Is there anything you'd want to share about projects, music you're working on, anything like that?
Yeah, so I would like to get out another album this year. I have the Roots Music Project this Friday, playing with the trio. I have some shows coming up at a local Southern Black-owned business, Mississippi Catfish, with the trio. And then May 31st at Dazzle Jazz Club. I'll be at 420 at Yacht Club. I've got a bunch of shows coming up. So if you want to get locked in, follow my Instagram at Chantil Music, spelled Chantil Music. And yeah, I'm hoping to put out an album this year, maybe two. I have a country jazz album in the works. I've written a lot of different kinds of songs, and I'm collaborating with this guitarist, JJ Murphy, on that project. One day I'm going to release an actual jazz album, but I've been doing my pop neo soul jazz stuff. But I have like hundreds of songs written, so I'm definitely releasing an album this year. I'm just not sure if it's going to be a neo soul jazz album or like old school jazz acoustic trio upright bass. I do already have the album cover picked out, and I think I have a recording studio picked out. So there's definitely new music coming down the pipeline. And I think I'm going to be doing an East Coast tour in September and doing some more collaborations with the Bumya. I'll be in Vermont next month. And yeah, there's a bunch of stuff coming down the pipeline, and it's kind of, some of it is manifesting in real time, and but yeah.
Oh, it's good. Lots of good things. And I forgot to ask you, who are you playing with on Friday? Who's going to be on stage with you?
So Friday, I've got a bad crew lined up. Parker Murphy on the bass and Matt Campbell on the drums. They're both incredible musicians, and they played with me when we did the show opening for Nate Smith at Cervantes, and they're both just awesome players, very dynamic and interactive. It's piano trio, especially, there's only 3 people, so there's a lot of space for creativity and interaction. So these guys really know how to get into that space, and it's going to be very creative and fun, and we hope to see you guys out there.
Well, thank you so much. And I will mention, if people are looking for tickets, I think Eventbrite is the place to go for tickets for this weekend. I know I've seen a lot of links pointing there. And single day tickets are on sale for right around $32, or a full weekend pass for both days for $50, which is incredible to see so much music for $50. I was like, wow, that is an amazing value. So hopefully a lot of people will make it out there and check everything out. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
Awesome. All right, hang out for just 1 second. And I am going to play our exit music if I can find it somewhere here. All right.